Everybody, and happy Tuesday. I gotta tell you, it's a warm one out here, and you might think I'm a little goofy because I have long sleeves on. I ran in and grabbed this shirt because there's these little biting things. I suspect there's some kind of a biting fly. I've heard the general term, the generic term, buffalo used. They don't leave a mark when they bite, but man, is it itchy later on. I'm going to try to cover up my short sleeves with some long sleeves, which, yes, that means I'm wearing 2 layers and it's 82 degrees out. That's why I got some hydration here. And yes, it's just water. Uh, we have so much to cover, though. I'm not sure where to start. Oh, yes, I do. You're not going to believe this. It's happened again. Another white walnut, another butternut. And this one, it wasn't stalking me. I was kind of stalking it. I dug it up. I'm just below the deck here and going out into the yard. I'm building an outdoor turtle enclosure for my scaly roommate, Artie. My box turtle will be celebrating 45 years together this year. And I hit something. I thought it was a rock. I dug it up. It's a white walnut. I don't know where these are coming from. Now, this one has not sprouted at all. And the ground, but I just had to laugh when it turned out to not be a rock. So I don't know where this tree is. I'm going to put in a little map of where I found these things at. But and yes, Kelly, I will let Artie know that someday he'll make an appearance. Maybe his actual gotcha day is lost to the sands of time. Well, actually, I could probably look it up. It was Monday of Columbus Day weekend in 1978. So yeah, I suppose we should plan a little bit of a blowout because that will be a Monday that we can celebrate together. Anyway, so yeah, that was one thing. Artie's going to get some outside time again. And then two, I found this, and yes, this has been entered in our U.S. Fish and Wildlife migratory bird permit, as well as our IDNR salvage permit. Let me see if I can hold this so you can see the colors on this feather. Is the yellow? I think the camera's picking up the yellow. Very eye-catching. That's better. That's the underside of the shaft, which would be the part that we would be most likely to see when this bird is out and about. It's also very pointy, and if you were to feel it, you would notice that it's really stiff. All of these are hallmarks of a bird. Well, now it's called the northern flicker, but here in the eastern part of the United States, it is the yellow shafted northern flicker. There's also a red shafted if you happen to travel west. Very, very similar bird. In fact, I think it's the same species. It's just the red variation. Here are yellow flickers. The males have a black malar stripe, like a mustache right here. Out west, the red shafted flickers have a red mustache. Now this feather is cool. It's a tail feather, hence the stiffness. So when woodpeckers are slamming their bills into a tree or other surface that they are either drumming on or excavating into, it helps to have a stabilizing force behind their dactyl toes up and 2 toes down, and this tail does this very nicely. I don't know if I do this. I don't know if you can hear that. It's really very stiff, stiffer than a lot of the feathers that you happen to find, and that pointy shape is another giveaway. We'll find these. I had my checkbook out the other day. I had to write a check, which I haven't done in forever, and 2 little downy woodpecker tail feathers fell out. I don't even remember when or where I found those. Hopefully they were entered on our permit. But oh, hello. So yeah, that's the one of the bird baths behind me there. I think I'm ruining that dove's plans to get a drink. Maybe if I talk a little more quietly, it will. Nope, it flew away. I don't know if the other sounds are getting picked up by this mic, but there's a lyric cicada that's calling. That's the one that's got the really long drone. It lasts for about a minute. To me, it sounds like something is loose. Now we're hearing a Linnaeus cicada. That's the more of a vibrato type sound. And I just setting up out here, I heard a scissor grinder. So that's 3 of the 4 species that are calling right now. It's interesting that the lyric cicada, the one with a really long call, they're more of a morning species. But I guess when it's this hot, muggy, remember what we always say, muggy weather is buggy weather. He might not want to give up. He might want to keep on going. Anyway, we've got a little cicada symphony behind us here. We talked about the walnut. We talked about the feather. Okay, so some of you are probably already aware of this. I think this may have come through maybe the plain dirt gardeners, these little baskets. So they come in different sizes, but they're a dollar store item, and it's sold in the container aisle. And you're supposed to, I guess, put whatever you need to contain inside of it and use it this way. But if you flip it over, you cut out this bottom part, and it is wire. You know, it's not plastic, it's wire, so it's pretty sturdy. But well, and it's up to you whether you want to cut the top off or not. Depends on what you're trying to protect. But you can anchor these in the ground. I've got a variety of things here. I'm going to try. I've got some. There's another one. We played pickup sticks when this is over. These are bamboo skewers. I got a couple different lengths of those, some longer ones, some shorter ones, and then I've also got some chopsticks as well. But you anchor these in the ground around your seedlings and other small plants. So rabbits, chipmunks, you name it, won't get to them. So they're like plant cages. And they're only $1.25. Sorry, everything's going up these days. But I thought it was a really cool trick, and I'm especially excited to try it on the lead plant that I have been trying unsuccessfully to get started. I got to tell you, lead plant, it is pretty rugged. It has come back every time the rabbits have mowed it down. But gosh, one of those lead plants is, I think it's the 3rd year, still only about this big. So I need to give this a try. I'll report back. I've also got a couple other small lead plants that I'm gonna plant with these cages on there. So some neat discoveries there that I wanted to share. And then this, let's see, I'm gonna see if I can do this without doing a screen share. I got an email that arrived just as I was starting to set up out here, and I laughed when I read it, and I wanted to share it with you. This is in response to last week's column on teasel, which Greg, I got to thank you for your permission to use the email that you'd sent. This was actually last week's column was by and large an email sent in by Greg, Mr. Swedberg, one of our loyal tuner-inners on Tuesday nights, and he wrote about his firsthand experience with teasel. And I've heard from people all over Northern Illinois who either A, had never heard of it, but now that they've seen it, are freaking out. or two have known about it for a long time. A couple people told me about an old, out in the rural areas, they used to have what were called thistle commissioners, who would go out and if you were found to have thistles on your property, you would be given notice that you had to remove them. And if you didn't, then you were fined. I think that's a great idea to help get our teasel situation under control. Anytime there's construction going on, they've got dirt piled up to the side. Like to call it soil, but once they've scraped it away like that, it loses a lot of character. But anyway, the teasel has really struck a lot of people in a lot of different ways. But this email, let's see here. So the subject of this email, Greg, it is teasel with 3 exclamation points, and yikes, all caps, and 5 exclamation points. And this woman writes, and she's been reading the Good Natured column in the Northwest Herald since discovering them a year or so ago, and blah 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 nature. So TEASEL. I've never seen, to my knowledge, nor heard of it before Saturday, but now, yowza, I think I've become quite fixated on, even alarmed by it. Yesterday, my husband and I were driving along back roads and by farmlands, returning from McHenry to Woodstock, where we live. And as it is now glued onto my mental radar, I began seeing it everywhere. I couldn't help but shout teasel. Again, all caps. And then in parentheses, no worries, my dear husband is accustomed to my little obsessions and outbursts. I'm just amazed by the whole thing. It's actually mind-blowing that perhaps this time next year, what we saw now as a rather small and scattered growth could be much, much, much more invasive, especially considering that Greg described seeing, how Greg described seeing it. I realize there are many alien invasions, but your portrayal, and Greg, she's talking to you, your portrayal of this one really gobsmacked me. Anyway, she just said anyway, I just felt compelled to pass this along and hope to not have wasted too much of your time. Yada yada, thank you. Thanks for the info and fun, and party on. That was from Lynn in Woodstock. So wasn't that fun? And Greg, thanks again for your permission to use that delightful chronicling of your encounters with teasel. I have been trying actually at Greg's request, because we've got teasel right here in St. Charles within our city limits, growing very notably along the Great Western Trail. Well, what we would like to be the Great Western Trail expansion. Right now it's still owned by Union Pacific Railroad, but right where the old railroad crosses Dean Street, it's the railroad's property. It's got not only teasel, but also Phragmites, giant reed. So if it's not one, it's the other. Both are highly invasive, and it's kind of growing uncontrolled. I mentioned it to our supervisor, and he said that maybe maybe call the code enforcement if we all have to maintain our properties to a certain standard. You think the railroad would too. So I might go down that road and see what might happen there. But yeah, lots of teasel, and it just takes a tiny little bit of disturbed on open ground that it can just take over and grow and produce zillions of seeds. And yes, Janice, yeah, people. So that's one of the ways people know about teasel is through flower arrangements. One woman had written that she remembered it from, I think it was her 5th grade teacher, had them all make Christmas arrangements to send home. And you can only imagine all those little 5th grade art projects probably didn't all get disposed of properly. Maybe back in the day they were burned, but maybe some of those were the start of some of the teasel colonies that we're seeing today. So let's see. You know what? We got a whole bunch of chats here, and I saw somebody make an important announcement about tomorrow's workday. So let's just address some of those before we launch into our slides. So let's see. Janice, okay, Janice says her sound issues worked out. Happy Gotcha Day, Artie. Yeah, we'll be celebrating, that's for sure. Yes, thank you, Meredith, for mentioning that. So those of you who participate in the Forest Preserve District's volunteer seed collections, they're supposed to start tomorrow at the Outlet Mall in, is that Aurora or North Aurora? Right there by the Aurora Outlet Mall, over by 88. I believe that's where they were going to be tomorrow, unless that was last week. Anyway, tomorrow's is canceled due to extreme heat. So if you're planning on going to a seed collection, put that off until next week, when hopefully the conditions will be a little bit cooler. Logging in and out, I got a little message pop up that my internet connection was unstable. Right now it looks like we're good. But hopefully my connection isn't causing you all any undue stress as we go through our hour together. Yeah, teasel and phragmites, it's like the clash of the titans of the invasives. I did get a lead on a couple of smaller, so again, within our parks, our crews are aware of it and they do try to stomp it out, but it is creeping in a few places. One is actually just north of that area on Dean Street. And by that area, we're talking about just a little bit east of Randall Road on Dean, near the industrial complex by the pond with the famous rock that has turtles and other creatures sitting on it over the course of the day. The park that's north of there, Timber Trails Park, had some starting to creep in over by, I think, Jill from our restaurant. I think she said it was either in the prairie area or by the pond, or knowing Teasel, it could be in both places. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. I got some other late breaking nature news that I wanted to share that I found when I was cleaning, not this bird bath behind me, but the other one on the other side of the deck. So let's go here. Oops. That's not the one I want you guys to see. X out of that. Let's go to slides and scroll up and we'll start here. Yeah, so I was emptying. So this is just, I have two really shallow dishes that I use for insects. One of them it's half little bits of gravel, smooth-sided gravel, and they're poking up out of the water. I call those the rescue rocks. So if an insect tumbles in there, they can hopefully paddle themselves over to those rocks to get out. This blue dish, until a couple hours ago, did not have a rescue rock in it, but now it does, because this little critter wasn't able to be rescued. Yes, it's a bird bath, so yes, that's something a bird left behind, but this was just the most interesting little creature, and by little I mean teensy. Here it is out of the water, no longer breathing. Unfortunately, it did not survive, but it was so interesting. I thought, you know what, it's got the shape of a ladybug and it's kind of marked like a ladybug. It just doesn't have colors that I'm familiar with of a ladybug. So I did a little digging around, starting with ladybugs, and found out, let me get our info on here. Yeah, I just took this today at 5 o'clock. Here's another view. Let's zoom in so we can see some of the pertinent details. We've got our head here and the pronotum, which is the area that covers the head and part of the thorax, or part of the head and the thorax. And then we've got the wing covers here. Lots of interesting marks, and on a very, very tiny body. can't emphasize that enough. This is even smaller than the immaculate ladybug, the native ladybug that we talked about last year, the one that doesn't have any spots typically on its back. This is a 14 spotted ladybug, and I do believe it's a male. It says, this is from Bug Guide, the males and the females can be told apart by the white markings on the head. Males have a solid white face, and the pictures they show, that wasn't white, it was this same kind of goldish background color. Females have a dark spot in the middle. If we zoom in on the face here, we can see this is all clear. There's no dark spot in the middle of this face. Whoops, close your eyes. That's a sneak preview. So yeah, this is a European species. They refer to it as Palearctic, but not in North America until it was there were intentional introductions that didn't stick, and then, as these things often go, there was an accidental introduction along the St. Lawrence River. And now it's pretty common throughout the eastern United States. I'm trying to think if I've ever seen one before. I don't think I have, but again, this is so tiny. So that stick there, that's not one of these bamboo skewers, or that's not a chopstick like I was holding up earlier. That's a toothpick. So this thing is really, really tiny. I would estimate its size at maybe, what would that be? Maybe 3 or 4 millimeters. Really, really tiny insect. Probably wouldn't have noticed it at all were it not for that fancy checkerboard pattern. The yellow looked much brighter in person than it was picking up on the camera here. But just another, let's see, we talked about the 7-spotted ladybug a few weeks ago. That's another European introduction. There's, I think over the last year or so, we've talked about 3 or 4, of course, not even including the Asian ladybug, because they're just everywhere. But I think we might be up to 4 different types of ladybugs, and I know we've got way more than that. I've been keeping a little tally of the numbers, the diversity, I should say, that we have in this family of ladybugs. So yeah, got a sneak peek of this. This is a nest that was discovered over at Pearson Creek Fen. Our restoration crew, Stephanie from our restoration crew, was they were either planting or herbiciding, because that's what they do there. And she noticed these eggs, and they first kind of reminded me of killdeer eggs. Here they, I don't know if you can hear them now. There's a scissor grinder cicada right above my head. I might drown this out. So we had a killdeer nest again near the nature center, but killdeer, they tend to lay their eggs in gravel, sometimes wood chips. Now this to me appeared to be a rudimentary nest, and killdeer aren't really known to do anything other than make a little scrape in the soil. And this actually looked as though something made an attempt to build a resting place for their little dumplings here. I think, considering what we've been seeing there and where this nest is, which, by the way, I'm not going to disclose any farther than the park, and it was very well hidden, Stephanie said. I think this is a spotted sandpiper, and they're one of a few shorebirds that we see here. Usually in the summertime, it's along the Fox River, but we can also sometimes see them inland, depending on the species. But when I was talking with the crew and I mentioned spotted sandpiper, they said, "Oh, we've been seeing one around there." So that's what we're going to go with for now. And I got to say, I am a very mediocre birder. There's a lot of things that baffle me all the time, but I love it when, in addition to markings, we can look at behavior. So I'm going to skip over here. This is all about birds, that wonderful Cornell University's Lab of Ornithology website. You can use it as a field guide. There's all sorts of components to it. Merlin, the app that a lot of us now have on our phones, that is also put out by Cornell's Lab of Ornithology. Anyway, they've got some video here on their spotted sandpiper ID page, and it is so helpful because you can see that even if you can't see details about the bird, this behavior is unmistakable. That continual tail bobbing that they do as they're walking around, kind of like, we've talked about in the past how babies will pump their tails when they're resting up in a tree, and it helps you distinguish them from other flies. And here is a spotted sandpiper foraging, and that little tail is bumping along. These guys, when they do that, when the tail is moving like that and the bird's tipping forward, it always kind of reminds me of those drinking birds that you know, with the tube kind of liquid and they lean forward and the little tail will learn to rock that and then it goes back up again. These guys always make me think of it. Okay, that's a fun thing. Let's stop that and go back to our site. So we think we're looking at a spotted sandpiper nest. And since, a lot of breeding efforts got underway pretty early this year, so we are seeing, I think, more than usual, the number of birds that are doing a second brood. And I think robins, maybe some of our cardinals too, might even be starting on a third brood. We're still hearing a lot of birds singing. And this is usually a time when things are starting to quiet down a little bit, but there's still some active breeders out there. This picture was sent to me from, I think it was the Culver Forest Preserve workday. Kim Egg, I don't know if you're on tonight, but Kim had sent me this during a workday, and she said that it was low, the nest was low in the vegetation. And whenever I hear low, I always think of song sparrows because that's what's low in the vegetation around our houses. Sometimes song sparrows even nest on the ground, but this was a more open area. So we had a lot more possibility. I was thinking, going in my head through other sparrow species that are fairly common around here. Like, I always make the assumption, rightly or wrongly, I always assume that it's something common. Every once in a while we get surprised and it's not. It is something rare. But if you start with the common things first, and then if you do end up eliminating them, then you can go down that road of something that's rare or at least unusual. So with these guys, I was looking up, I have a field guide, Peterson Guide to Bird Nests, but you can also look up a lot of birds' nests on Google.
Put the word mute on here.
That will give the materials, the location, so the height, the materials that the bird uses. Is there mud present? Is it grasses? Are there rootlets or pine needles, feathers? A lot of birds will add a signature. I think it's the great crested flycatcher that incorporates snakeskin into its nest. So anyway, you can use a lot of different little clues. I believe what we're looking at here is the nest of a yellow-throated warbler, the witchetty of the common yellow, I'm sorry, not yellow, the common yellow throat. I wrote that wrong. I should probably, let me change that. These are the guys that we're hearing all the time when you're out in a grassland or in a prairie. And they're the birds, the males have a very prominent, I think of it as a robber mask, Bob. I think you call it the Lone Ranger's mask. I don't know if these birds, their eyes weren't even open yet, but it does look kind of dark on this individual, like maybe it has the start of a dark mask. And what I thought was funny was this came up in my Facebook feed. that very same day. Here's a male common yellow throat. And yes, you can steal his look with all these fancy and highfalutin pieces of fashion. Um, Prada makes a cashmere sweater, which would be great on a night like this, along with a cap and a wool coat. But anyway, this is what the male common yellow throat looks like. And I kind of think that was a common yellow throat nest that they found there at that workday. So yeah, it's a great, it's kind of a hobby of mine actually. I tend to do it more nest ID. I tend to do it more when it's after the leaves have come down off the trees and the nests aren't being used anymore. It's surprising once the foliage is gone, how many nests you can discover if you just start to poke around. Now, some of you attended on Saturday our freshwater mussel class that we held at Creek Bend Nature Center. Well, there was a little bit of prep that went into that just to see what sort of mussel life we have. This was Pearson Creek at Leroy Oaks Forest Preserve. And again, won't say exactly where, but we did have a pretty diverse group of mussels. I take that back. It wasn't diverse. We didn't have a ton of species, but the species that we had, one of them, this one pictured here, the state threatened spike. We found a few of those when we were doing the prep on Wednesday. And they were alive, which is even better. Found some cool old bottles too. The thing with mussels, so there's the shape of the mussel. Sometimes you can use the outside characteristics, the shell color. Some mussels, the species will have some green rays running through them. Sometimes not. This is just a dark. Spikes are known to be very dark. They're also noted for the inside, the part they call the mother of pearl part of the shell, the nacre. That's a very rich purple color. So if you do find a shell that's the animal's no longer living, and it's got this cylindrical shape and this dark purple, chances are pretty good that you found if it's in Illinois, state threatened spike. Now, there's another trait that we look at, and that is what we call, on live mussels, we call this part of the shell the beak or the umbo, UMBO. And this always kind of baffles me because one, tends to wear away over time. So if you're dealing with older mussels, sometimes the beak sculpture is almost erased. And two, the interpretations, the verbal descriptions of them, I don't always see what is being described. In the case of the spike, it's called, it's said to have 3 or 4 parallel ridges. Okay, I'm not seeing parallel, I'm seeing crumpled. Maybe they're talking farther out. But really, this is the heart of the beak here, and then it goes out in these concentric rings. To me, this one looks kind of like a ET, maybe a frowny face ET looking up here. Again, open to a lot of interpretation, but it was cool to find living spikes there in Pearson Creek. These mussels aren't always easy to see. I don't remember offhand which species this was, but can you even see it? That was the thing, you know, Pearson over the last, say, 10 years or so has gotten, there's a lot more sediment that's coating things that are living on the bottom. That sediment then breeds algae, it gives algae a source of nutrients, and so things start to get covered up. this is a rock, and this is a rock, and this is what we call rocks with guts or mussels. This is the mussel here. Here is its aperture that's open. They filter. They feed themselves by filtering. So they have one aperture, the in current hole where water goes in, and then they have the X current where they push the water back out again. Their body inside will process the nutrients they're able to extract from the water, the phytoplankton, the zooplankton. They also take in a lot of different other things like bacteria, heavy metals. Some of that becomes incorporated into their shell. The mantle is the inside. It's a part of the organs on the inside of the mussel, and it's the mantle is the organ that's responsible for taking the calcium out of the water and adding it to the shell to help the shell grow. So that most of the shells in our area are pretty well. Actually, there's one that's pretty weak. A few that are pretty weak. Never mind. I was going to say most of the shells around here are pretty thick, but there's some that are pretty thin too. Just depends on the species and what those species traits are. Here's one that is very, very thin, and these, believe it or not, are adults. These are a species or a group of mussels that are called fingernail clams. I think we've talked in the past about the difference between mussels and clams. Just briefly, a mussel, in order to reproduce and disperse its young, it needs a fish host to carry its offspring away, whereas a clam can just put out its offspring all around it. It kind of gives birth there in the in the substrate. So these fingernail clams, you can see my friend Jesse's fingernail next to the fingernail clam, about the same size. As we were looking in the shallows, this was still at Pearson Creek, we found this. Now this is an Asian clam at the bottom. So that's one of our introduced species. You can see Asian clams are very symmetrical. Our native mussel species, that beak or umbo, is always going to be off to the side. But the Asian clams, it is smack in the middle of this somewhat triangular shape. So right here is the beak. And living inside is there's a caddisfly who glued little bits of substrate together to make a home. I was actually gonna keep this as a little memento until I realized it was still inhabited. If we zoom in here, I don't know if we can see. Yeah, here the caddisfly came out to see what all the fuss was about. It incorporated a fingernail clamshell and a bunch of little stones into its home that it has glued together with, here's some sticky strands of silk that, I don't know if those are structural silk or if those are bits of silk that it's using to trap food, which is one of the ways that caddisflies catch their food in the water. Caddisfly larvae, I should say. This will eventually pupate and leave the water, and it'll look for all the world like a little brown moth, but it's not a moth because its wings are covered with hair and not scales as true moths are. So also in our prep, we were walking in the creek trying to get the thing with looking for mussels. There's a few different ways to do it. You can crawl on your hands and knees and you can feel the substrate with your hands, and you can feel the difference between a rock and a shell. That's one way. That's a way you can do that if it's cloudy and you can't see through the water, or if you're working in a riffle or some other way where you can't see through the water to the substrate. What we were doing to prep for the class was just walking in still areas and looking down to the substrate below. As you're doing that, you notice all kinds of things, including, I don't know if you can see our little friend that we saw. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more because even I can't really see it from this angle. Okay, I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to zoom in. Can you see who joined us? There's a little northern water snake. I think, yeah, here's a slightly better view. It was still kind of blurry. I was so excited. I probably wasn't holding still. Did not try to catch this one. I would say this snake was, I don't know, maybe 18 inches long or so. It was not this year's young, maybe last year, the year before. But yeah, just hanging out there in the shallows, probably looking for a little frog or tadpole or a fish, something like that. We also saw a considerable amount of insect life. This is a male American ruby spot. We're getting photobombed here by another damselfly. I don't know the species. I don't know very many damselflies, but the ruby spot is a unmistakable one because the wing is a spot like a ruby. That's the male. The female is kind of more of this color without the red on the wings. And then hoping this will play, and if not, we can just look at the two adults here. This is, oh, here we go. So this is the male and female ebony jewel wing damselflies. We stop the action here. What we're looking at here is the male right here and the female right here. The female has white dots on each of her, I think that's the forewing that has the white dot on it. But look at this, their bodies make a shape like a heart. Isn't that adorable? He actually has clasped the tip of his abdomen. He grabs her behind the head. Now, see, now it's not going to sound very romantic. He's got these claspers that hold on to her head, and then she curves her body around. And this is how we get more ebony jewel rings. Oh, actually, this is how we get more damselflies. This is pretty common sight at this time of year. Ebony jewel wings are not terribly common though. Fearsome Creek is one great place to go check them out. So this was another little bonus. Did not even, and we just sort of paused here for a moment and happened to look who's in the creek. A little fawn getting a drinky wink. The slightly better picture here. He or she became aware of us looking at it and commenting on its cuteness, so it walked back out. This was the area of Fearsome Creek where a dam was removed about, I want to say 10 to 12 years ago. It was around 2010, 2011. There was a dam. It's not an IDNR dam. It was a dam that was placed by the property owners back in the day. There's another one farther downstream that I think still exists, but the Forest Preserve District made the decision to, in the interest of keeping Fearsome Creek or returning Fearsome Creek to its free flowing status. They wanted to pull those boulders apart and get the water moving. Once the water is able to flow freely and the fish can swim freely, animals like freshwater mussels can use their fish hose to disperse freely, and all kinds of good things happen. So yeah, if you happen to ever wonder if you're walking out there at along Fearsome Creek at Leroy Oaks, and you wonder, geez, those are awfully big boulders. Where did those come from? That's why they were there for that dam back in, I want to say, like the 1930s. Couldn't resist taking a picture of the forget-me-nots that proliferate along that stretch of the creek. Forget-me-nots were very important to a lot of settlers in our area. This was one of the plants that people brought with them from the old country. In fact, I remember being on a naturalist-led walk up in Door County. I think it was Peninsula State Park. And they have done a lot of restoration there. They removed a lot of non-native plants, but they made a decision to let some of the forget-me-not stay, because that was they called it a cultural relic, because they were brought there by people. I think they said they were Scandinavian immigrants who brought these flowers from the old country as a reminder to forget them, not to forget about where their roots came from. It's kind of an interesting thing too about forget-me-nots. There's a few different species, but they all are in the genus of Myosotis, and that is from the Greek for mouse and the Greek for ear. Supposedly, this foliage looks, it's in the shape of a mouse's ears. I don't know, it's a mighty long-eared mouse, but don't want to argue with the taxonomist. So walked a little bit farther, and you might be able to see our next friend that we took note of. Probably related to our other reptile friend that we saw in the creek. Instead of zooming in, let's just go to the next slide. Here we have another northern water snake stretched out amongst the vegetation there by the those of you who know the site might be familiar with the little white bridge that is downstream from Creek Bend Nature Center. That little white bridge is actually going to be replaced. If you happen to find yourself at Leroy Oaks in the next couple of weeks, you may notice there's a bridge in the parking lot of the Nature Center. That bridge is going to go and replace that old white bridge. The new bridge is actually an old bridge too. It was removed from a bike trail somewhere. It's got a nice curve to it. It's a very attractive bridge. The one that's there is kind of flat and looking like it's seen better days. So new bridge, new to the creek bridge will be coming there soon. I put this out mainly, I'm still kind of kicking around with identifications. This was a smallish, and it looked carpenter ant-ish. I looked around and found that there is a small carpenter ant called Camponotus subarbatus. Not too confident on the pronunciation, and I'm not too confident on the ID either, but I wanted to show you. So oftentimes when we cover ants like this, the assumption is to say, oh, there's the ants and there are its eggs, because these are all ant shaped, but these are actually the pupae. So these are the ant larvae that the worker ants have fed and grown up to the size where they are now pupating. See if we zoom in here, you can kind of see the beginnings of ants. Oh, maybe you can't. It's more obvious in the in the sunlight there in the wood. These are ants. They're so carpenter ants. You know, they like to. They don't feed on wood the way our termite friends do. But they do tunnel through dead wood, and that's where they make their homes, and that's where their colonies. That's why they're not such a great thing to have in your house, because of what they do to our houses. Our houses are all made of dead wood. So carpenter ants are better to be outside friends as opposed to inside friends. But yeah, these white things, not ant eggs, they are ant pupa. This little guy, I've been seeing a lot of them. In fact, kind of wish I had some with me tonight, because they eat other bugs and my hands are getting all chewed up by whatever those little gnats are. This is the larva of the green lacewing. If we zoom in, we can see its predatory mandibles here. These guys eat other small insects. I think they eat a lot of aphids, but these little gnats, I think they can handle them as well. Green lacewings you might recognize from your outside lights at night. I've been seeing some around here. In fact, I think I see one on the door here at Casa Otto. So they're very prevalent at this time of year, and it would make sense that we're seeing their larvae now too. I'm putting this out there, guys. I don't know what to make of this. This was a caterpillar that our summer camp kids found. One, I'm not sure if it's a caterpillar. It might be a sawfly larva of some sort, but we're not able to see the prolegs, as insects, caterpillars, and sawfly larvae, they have their 6 permanent legs, the legs that they will retain into adulthood. And then they've got those sticky pads that are called prolegs. And caterpillars, which will turn into either a moth or a butterfly, will have, I think it's 5, up to 5 pairs of prolegs. But sawflies will have more pairs than that. They'll have prolegs all along the bottom of their body. Well, so one, I don't know if it's a caterpillar or sawfly larva. And 2, I don't know what this thing is. You see that? I asked the camp counselors and they said that bright green thing was attached to the caterpillar. To me, it looks like the caterpillar like backed into a jujube and it got stuck on its bottom. I've never seen a structure like that. Let's zoom in on this one. I've tried doing an image search on this too to see if anything popped up and nothing did. This head here, that looks a little strange. It looks a little non-caterpillar. I guess that's part of the reason I was thinking maybe sawfly larva of some sort. But again, it's the structure on the bottom. If any of you have any ideas of what it might be, or if you've seen something like this before, I would love to hear about it because I didn't know what to make of it. And those camp kids, they want answers. So if we can get them one, you can get them one, you guys would be heroes. You might have seen these in your garden. I always feel a little bit bad. Well, it's one of those things. It's a, this is nature, but I like caterpillars. But I like wasps too. What we're looking at here, these are braconid wasp cocoons. So a few weeks ago, a female braconid wasp came, and I think these are all the wounds where she pierced the skin of this caterpillar and laid eggs. Those wasp larvae, this is the stuff horror movies are made of. In fact, literally horror movies are made of. That movie Alien, we always talk about how the alien has jaws that were patterned after the mouth parts of a dragonfly nymph. Well, the idea of having an alien growing inside of a human is also based on insect life cycles. There's an awful lot of wasps that do that. So anyway, the braconid wasp lays its eggs. The larvae feed on the inside of the caterpillar. So this caterpillar right now is kind of a zombie. It's not going to survive. It's not really dead. It's not very alive. It is a tobacco hornworm. It was feeding on tomatoes. In fact, so was this one. Tobacco hornworms seem to be the norm of what we see in this area, even though they feed on, we find them on our tomato plants. They are tomato plants, tobacco plants, families, plants in the nightshade family. Those are all suitable foods for these caterpillars. The tobacco hornworm has 7 stripes on its side. And stick with me on this. 7 is a lucky number. And the little spike here at the tip of the abdomen, that is a characteristic of a lot of sphinx moths. It's red on the tip like a cigarette. So lucky strikes or a cigarette. That's how you can remember that this is a tobacco hornworm. 7 is a lucky number, and the little horn on the hornworm glows red is red like a glowing cigarette. Whew. Every once in a while, we might run across a tomato hornworm in this area. Tomato hornworms have a black spine back here, and they have 8 stripes on the side of their body. If you can remember, V8 juice is composed largely of tomato juice, then you can maybe keep the two species straight. Anyway, they are both subject to parasitism. Actually, these are parasitoids because they kill their host. That caterpillar is not going to survive. It's a great way of natural insect control. A lot of people, they see these caterpillars feeding on their tomatoes, they freak out, they put poison on them. Doesn't kill just the caterpillars. There's a lot of unintentional targets that are hit with those insecticides. So this is a great way. And these caterpillars were incubating lots and lots of future wasps to carry on the cycle. This was a neat little thing. This was out at Gray Willows on Friday. This it wasn't living anymore, unfortunately, but really cool example here of a carrion beetle, one that we don't see quite, or I don't personally see quite as often. We've got the 2 or 3 other species that are more common, but this one I thought was interesting. It's the pustulated carrion beetle. Most carrion beetles rely on carcasses. That's where they lay their eggs. That's what their larvae develop on, by eating the flesh of dead things. Some carrion beetles, like a lot of flies, play a role in forensic entomology. Well, these guys, besides laying their eggs on dead stuff, they can also lay their eggs on snake eggs. So it got me curious as to whether this beetle had, if there was a nest of snake eggs nearby. I kind of hope not, actually, because this is also a parasitoid of snake eggs. So when they lay their eggs on, lay their beetle eggs on the snake egg does not survive. So again, it's a control mechanism that nature has. One population controls another, keeps populations in check. And this was a new one. I hadn't seen this one before. They're not particularly rare or anything, but it's another example of diversity. One last thing, folks, I see it's after 9 o'clock, but I wanted to show you from the mussel class on Saturday. So we did the prep on Wednesday, but on Saturday, look what we found. So this is a mussel, but that's not what I took the picture of here. Let's look at what is on the mussel. I'm going to zoom in here. These are snail case making caddisflies. So we looked at that caddisfly earlier that had the glued all the little bits of stone and the little fingernail clam to make its house. Well, these guys, these are not snails. These are the cases of these Helicocyca caddisflies. There's different species, but the you have to look at the resident that's inside, and plus I don't think I would know what to look for anyway, but the shape of their case is diagnostic. And that was super cool. We don't see these in all of our streams. Let's see if we can zoom in on this one. Yeah, it's a little blurry too, but you get to see, you can see the spiral goes here and here and here. The snail case making caddisfly. Cool stuff, huh? All right. You know, I'm going to cut it off here because we've got some more slides. I'll just save them for next time, which is not going to be next week. Next week is August 1st. That's a bye week for Good Nature. We will reconvene again on Tuesday, August 8th. I think we had a couple more chats to get to here. Okay. So polished lady beetle. Yeah, Jerry, that's another name for the immaculate lady beetle, that Munda. And on your dill even. Yeah, the spectacle. So Jerry, I think you're talking about the markings on the pronotum. They make a little like they look kind of like,
it looked like it was wearing white glasses.
yeah, and they're small, right? That's what caught.
Yeah, they're very small. They're
Yeah.
cute.
we're used to seeing all the Asian lady beetles, and they're big. And so anytime you
Yeah.
see something that is either notably bigger than that or smaller. Like a few weeks ago, I think you might have been gone. We've talked about the 7-spotted lady beetles, and that one caught my eye because it was big. And I'm always hopeful. Oh, it's not an Asian lady beetle. Maybe it's a native one, but the 7-spotted is European as well. But yeah, those polished lady beetles, they're teensy, tiny little
Yeah,
guys.
it was crawling along. You know how the dill plants, it almost looks like a firework and the flowers are the sparks. I don't know, I might be describing it wrong, but it was climbing around there. I don't know what it was eating, but
Yeah.
on the
Yeah,
flowering
that's
part.
weird because they're used. I mean, I don't think dill isn't really known for aphids, is it?
Yeah, although there are tomato plants right there, so who knows?
Oh, maybe there was something there. Or maybe it just fell. Happened to land
I
there.
don't know. It was cute though.
Super cool. Oh, and look, Laura's chiming in. House sparrows are on their 3rd brood. Yeah, that Prado sweater was expensive. Yeah, there's. It seems like everything got going so early this year. We're seeing the reproductive cycles that are normally seen in areas south of here. I'm fairly certain our red-winged blackbirds had 2 broods this year, and I think they usually only have 1. I know people were telling me that the birds were attacking them in early to mid-June, and that's usually, we don't hear about bird attacks until July. So, which then we did have a second run just recently. Our restoration crew was like, oh yeah, no, they're back and they're defending their nest territories. But it seems like they snuck in or were able to not sneak. They were able to complete 2 breeding cycles because of their early return this year and the warm weather that we had early on. And yes, stinging nettles, Laura, I had to carefully, when we were prepping for that class, I had to, because there was a area I wanted to go into, but we had told people that we would be going in the water and I anticipated people showing up with shorts on. So we kind of had to tread carefully. The area we went into though was pretty nettle free. There were 2 guys fishing there, and I think they might have had the micro gear, the tiny needles, tiny little fish hooks going for the tiny little fish. I felt bad because here they're having a peaceful morning fishing on Fearson Creek and 25 people show up. But they were cool, and we tried to not mess too much up, where they were fishing. But it was relatively nettle free in that one area. If you happen to be in that area, Laura, I know you guys creek walk a lot. When you walk down the path away from the nature center that follows the creek, there's an orange flag where you turn off the main path and head towards the creek. It's pretty wide, pretty well trodden, and pretty nettle free.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking a little further down as you start to take the right toward the bluffs.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where
Yeah.
I've encountered them many times.
Well, yeah, and they're because there was a guy in the group who had never seen stinging nettles before, and so I wanted to show him, and where we were standing, I didn't see any, and then he had to leave. He was one of the ones that had to leave right at 11. So I hope he didn't find any, on his own later.
It's a nasty surprise.
And yeah, I think the northern water snake population at Leroy Oaks is thriving. It really seems like every year there's more. And I saw 2 the day we were there prepping. There was a camp there that day that there must have been, I don't know, 150 kids or more. I mean, it was just huge. You would think with that heavy of usage that the snakes would not be that obvious, but then again, northern water snakes, they're pretty fearless. They're the only snake I know who will actually come towards you as opposed to trying to get away from you in a situation like that. All right, tell you what, folks, we are past time, you probably can't, well, that's the thing, you can't see these bites, but boy, my hands are itchy. I'm gonna go see if I can find some anti-itch cream to stop these. Oh, can you see that one? Right there. Anyway, I'm itchy. It's hot. You guys have been troopers hanging in here as long as you have. Much appreciated your time. We will reconvene again, not next week on August 1st, but the following week on August 8th. I'll see you then, everybody. Have a great couple of weeks.
Thank you, Pam.
Thanks, Pam.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Pam.
Good
Night, Pam.
Have a good
Thanks,
one.
Pam.